very interesting for us. It's of course something outside our core business to look at the sustainability, but it's important for all the buildings we have, all things we do has to have this sustainable angle to it.
Thanks, Helle. Our next member of the team is Jonas Engberg from Ikea.
Yes. Hello. Thank you. Well, some of you might know Ikea mobility. I can talk about sustainability strategies in general. I'm not going to bore you with that, but talk about the mobility aspects and then the Copenhagen kind of setting. We have around 6 million visitors to our 2 stores in Copenhagen at the moment. And traffic and impact from those 6 million people traveling to and from our stores is around 3 times higher than the impact from our own transport and our own energy consumption put together. Of course, that is our main focus. In 2025, we'll have 100% electrified home transport, have a full extended infrastructure. All of our own fleet will be electrified. And we will work with also, some of you might have heard of this, kind of locating us closer to where people actually live. That is part of our overall agenda, moving closer to where people live, not just to cut down on transport and emissions from transport, but far more because we see a changing behavior in how we purchase things, how we live together, and we very much want to tap into that. So thank you for letting us be part of this, and thank you for Copenhagen for being part of letting us be part of such a great place.
Great.
It is.
Thank you, Jonas. Kasper Harbour, you are Head of Mobility for the City of Copenhagen.
Thank you. In Copenhagen, we've been working with mobility plans and a climate plan for many years. Since 2012, we have had a climate plan for Copenhagen with a very ambitious goal to become carbon neutral in 2025. We have reduced our carbon emissions with, I think, 32% since 2005. We'll be electrifying all our buses at least within the next 8 years. Latest in 2025. We're doing very well when it comes to our own fleet of electric cars, hydrogen cars, and so forth. But when it comes to private cars, we have it's a huge problem. Then we still have a long way to go. We have only managed to reduce carbon emissions from private cars and lorries with, I think, 7 or 8% in the last 15 years. So that's, I think, is our biggest challenge.
Okay. Thank you, Kasper. Paul van Koningsbruggen, you're from Technolution.
Technolution. We have been in a wonderful position to support the City of Copenhagen in the last 3 years to bring alive eco-driven traffic management. And traffic management, we know there are streams of road users and try to manage them in a scarce road capacity. Eco-driven is much more. It's a step forward. It's a step that we say, okay, but there are cyclists, there are pedestrians, there are electric cars. There is a lot of different, perhaps even greener, much greener mobility that we would like to give a very distinguished place on the road network and give them priority where we can give them priority. And this is a wonderful layer. This is a layer effect that you need to make a next step. And the next step is necessary in the sense that traffic management is still trying to manage, metaphorically, the water that is streaming. Even flooding us. When the water starts to flood you, you have to go back to the source, and the source where people start. That's it. So coming from eco-driven traffic management, the most logical step is can we touch upon mobility management. So that's my inspiration for today.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Nicolai Kuhn, you are Head of Business Development at Nobina.
Hello. Yes.
Who is Nobina?
Thank you very much. Nobina is a bus operator. And basically how we impact the environment is through driving emissions from our engines. And what we are experiencing is a small revolution in terms of our business. Because we're going from diesel and into electric and hydrogen, which has a lot of demands on basically our organization and how we run our business. Furthermore, we drive buses with chauffeurs on board, but what we are developing right now is also bus services without any drivers. So those are two important things which will help us have cleaner driving, but will also support more public transport and fewer private cars, hopefully.
Okay. Thank you, Nicola. Next to last person in the team is Peter Yule from Movia. Another bus operator. Or
apart from the slide, I can add that Movia is owned actually by Copenhagen and Albertslund and Region Hovedstaden.
Can you hold the mic closer? Yeah.
And 45 other municipalities and the 2 regions, and we contract our operation to operators like Nobina. We move something like 220 million passengers a year, and sustainability is increasing on our agenda as well. We also had a lot of diesel buses, but next year,
Peter, I think they, yeah.
Next year we have two good developments in Roskilde. There's one where the buses will become fully electric, and then later in the year in Copenhagen we have 2 big lines become fully electric. So that's one part, and the other part is the autonomous vehicles that are also pushing the agenda, and we are testing this right now in Køge at the hospital, and we're moving on to another hospital in Slagelse next year. So we hope to provide some knowledge for future developments.
Okay, thank you. Anna.
Hi, I'm Anna Thurman from Gate 21, and I'm happy to see you here. Most of you are partners in Gate 21 or partner in the projects that we run, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion with you to see how we can go on cooperating. Gate 21 is a partner organization in Greater Copenhagen. We have 90 partners by now, and we also run 90 triple helix projects, innovative projects. The partners in our organization meet to make a green transition of the society together in the fields of energy, resources, smart city, and mobility. And I'm head of sustainable mobility, and some examples of the projects that we're doing is one of them is moving people. It's a project on mobility management with 17 municipalities in the region of Copenhagen and 86 companies, employers, and all the employees, they have to maybe shift from driving alone by car to other means of transport. These companies, these employers, they are very keen on what is going on in mobility, in new mobility services that they are looking into in the future. Then we have a project on a data hub across municipality, where we collect data and share them across municipalities to address challenges in the mobility sector. That has just started out now. The final project I want to mention is Future Intelligent Mobility, where we look into what are the municipalities' roles in the future mobility services. They are not running the services themselves, but for example a station, they should be servicing these new flexible transport means, car sharing, bike sharing systems and all this. So how does it look in a future station? These were some of the projects. So I want to now hear the debate and where we explore how to make CO2 reductions more a part of the intelligent transport system.
Right, well then, let's go to the next slide. So just a reminder, if there's anybody that's joined recently, this is the first open ITS meeting that we've held at this Congress, or I think any Congress. So we are trying something out, and thank you for being part of that. Our game is we are here together as you've heard all these different stakeholders and actors. They're part of what needs to be a solution. It needs to be really a universal solution if we're going to achieve a target of 40% reduction. let's just stay with that, because actually what I read today from the German Aerospace Institute, that's too modest. We're going to go way over the 1.5 degree increase unless we do something pretty drastic. Now what you've heard is that everybody is doing something, and everybody is pretty well doing what they can at the moment. Probably Copenhagen is going to be one of the first cities to have an all-electric bus fleet. It's the first capital city committed to being carbon neutral. And everyone around the table has told you what they're doing. Everyone is doing something. So I would say there's good progress, but what we are skirting around, and you said it, Casper, you said that the city of Copenhagen is doing what it can, what is in its power, but it has no direct control, or very little, over what? Individual vehicles, and especially internal combustion engine vehicles. So this is kind of probably the problem area to be attacking, because the collective stuff we do, the transport operators themselves are doing it, the big employers are already doing mobility management. So what we're here really to discuss and explore is what else they can do, either by themselves or more probably by working in some way with the other people around this table, or a much larger group. You've heard there are 90 partners in Gate 21. Each of them has an interest here. So what we need to do in some way is make carbon emissions a decisive factor when people make travel choices. Today it is not a factor because it has no price. So we're going to explore a little bit later how we could have the equivalent of a price on, let's say, a kilogram of CO2. And the other thing is, if anyone was in the session before about mobility as a service, about MaaS, if you know anything about it, is a kind of all-in-one mobility service that you would buy from a MaaS service provider, who then, because you don't then need your own car, mobility is on demand. You know, like, hey, I want a car, or I need a small bus for the weekend, or to go out to the country, to my house in the country. So, matching any mobility demand. So, your customers, you're a retailer, your customers going to your store, but before their customers go, the employees have to get there. And you've got the logistics, and you've got, with your in-town store, you're going to need some form of some delivery, because people are going to go shopping for a large piece of furniture on foot or with a bike, so they're not going to carry it with them. So how do we work out how to match the demand that we may discover now with the supply? Now we have some of the suppliers here. What I'd like also to explore, following some of the ideas of MaaS, is where else supply can come from. And then our purpose, so I'm telling you now where I'm looking a bit ahead to the end of the session, to see what these partners can do together beyond what they are doing individually. And I think they accept that is necessary. And I would like to think that the outcome of this meeting is actually a decision on their part, Gate 21's part, to do something further. So we're going to agree on something, and instead of all going away after this meeting, I'm hoping that they will agree, at least let's take another step that's worth looking at in more depth, not standing around in front of an audience, but actually being perhaps the members of a board of something new. So that's the game, just to remind us all. So let's pick out a couple of things where, from what you've heard from other people, where do you think, any of you, that there's a potential for saving some extra carbon emissions by doing something together with them? Yeah.
There are many potentials in doing carbon savings by working together. And I think what is crucial in understanding this mobility is complex, but it's also about what we do, all of us. Our customers are not just Ikea customers, and our co-workers are not just co-workers. They're also people who use the city, who live somewhere, go shopping elsewhere, do many, many different things. And it's about understanding I wouldn't call it the complexity, yes, you need to understand that, but then also how to make it work well, because none of us have an interest in a city that's not working well. People don't want to live in a city that's not working well, mobility-wise. I think also decoupling from fossil dependence is something we all need to take into consideration in how we develop our companies individually. So that from a bus service perspective, being dependent on volatile fossil fuel prices, it makes it really difficult to plan long term. Same with our plastic prices, prices on other commodities, including transport. We just need to take that necessary step and decouple ourselves and the future growth patterns we have from fossil fuel dependence. Then we'll see stuff happening. We can do that individually, but we need to be part of a greater mobility scheme where we individually contribute to any more we can. Working together with the city as retailers is really, really important. In the process leading up to sort of making decisions on where to put new stores, working really close with the municipality in the future needs and understanding how transport will develop around that, and then developing into something that accommodates sort of the future need of a more sustainable transport pattern is a necessity for all of us. I don't know if that was a clear answer to everything. Anything other than we are really, really interested in working together with all the interested parties.
I really liked the idea of an in-town, downtown Ikea store. I don't know, everyone here, I guess, lives with Ikea, and my house is full of Ikea's furniture. My children always wanted to go shopping, to buy this stuff, and it was always something we put off because it's a journey to hell. I live in the Brussels region. We have 2 Ikea stores. They are each of them the size of this entire hall. It seems like that, and it's on 2 floors. It takes an hour just to walk around, and it takes half an hour to get into the store because there's one narrow road leading from the motorway to this 25-hectare car park. So it isn't easy. It's not pleasant. Like, you make it as pleasant as possible once you're inside, but to get the stuff home then, you're going to need some sort of transport. Now, you've mentioned that you would turn to electric vehicles. I guess you're thinking, because again, you're thinking an Ikea perspective, that you would provide that transport yourself. You might have an Ikea branded fleet of delivery vehicles. I'm glad you say not necessarily, because let's decouple. Not necessarily, but let's decouple that then. Let's decouple the transport from the responsibility, from the retailing itself, or the running the store, getting your employees to the store. That's a mobility issue as well.
Can I just come in?
Say, yes.
Yes, I understand your road to hell and back normal experience completely, and a few other people feel like you. The future of IKEA will develop in a direction where we get closer, as I said, to our consumers. And with the migration, development around the world, we see a globalization from a global perspective. People, the urbanizing trends, we see that very clearly. Congestions, and people living closer together, not owning cars and everything. All those signs are indications that we need to move into the city centres, which is luckily what we're trying to do in Copenhagen, and which we have a concrete plan of doing. We've done a complete setup yet, but it's something which exactly taps into that. Then it's like a big showroom or something, and then you go and see all the nice stuff, you decide what you want, and then we will transport it onto you. There we are completely opening for looking into solutions where we would partner up with someone else, or it'd be a combined service between different retailers who have the same need. Absolutely, that's some of the future we see. Otherwise, we would have different trucks from different retailers delivering each a small package, and then we'd get nowhere.
Exactly, and that is kind of the way that things work today, isn't it? One thing I think, if we are going to compete with whatever our solution is, if it's some kind of mobility as a service, or delivery as a service, whatever it is, we've got to more or less equal the ease and quality of the journey for the customer, and sort of forcing them out of their car, but then to make a long journey, or to wait for a service line bus that comes every half an hour or something. I'm exaggerating. But the word on demand is going to be a really important part of future mobility. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Niels.
I think one of the reasons why Copenhagen area is quite big success when it comes to green transition and livability, where you actually have a very happy population, is actually due to the close relation to the citizens. So the involvement of the citizens' needs, you also talk about that. How to comply with, you want a more individual lifestyle, and then you have all the disruptions going on. We have to incorporate that we are disruptive like hell, and we are changing the way we send letters, we receive letters, we purchase things, how we live, how we work. And we have to take that into consideration. And then I think, as cities, we in our area maybe have a different positions in so many other parts of the world that we are rather fat, we are rather big, we have many obligations, we are rather solid, so we're not so poor. And we are trustworthy. That means we have cities with people working inside the cities who people trust. So when we make plans, first of all, we can work together. We are sharing a vision with the region who can provide visions, who can provide cooperation, which can provide funding for institutions like Gate 21, who can make this cooperation possible. Companies trust the public authorities, universities get involved, so we're all on the edge, trying all the time to incorporate the new developments, the new tech possibilities, and to take that into consideration about how we plan and how we plan for our cities. And I think doing it together with the citizens are all what it's all about. It's about livability, it's about a good life, it's about a quality of life, it's about a green life. And I think that's maybe one of the reasons why we can do it. And I think the more we accelerate this transition, the more better off we'll be rather quick. And I think this is an example to follow. And by telling the truth, there's so many places on the earth where there not is this trust between who is in power and who is not in power.
Cora.
Yeah, I agree very much. And to be a bit more direct, I would say, if we can't do it with this trust and with actors like this together, who can? So I think we really have a big responsibility here to show the way and show how it can be done. And if you look at what has been done, it has, I think we are looking always at what is, how can we do it easier, nicer, with bike lanes, maybe mobility as a service. And I like that track because nobody gets hurt. It's people, if it's easier and nicer for everybody, of course it's quite good to do, and you can also send some signals and do some identity, and that's what has worked some of the way. But if we really have to go somewhere, we need to get into, be very clear, please stand together, and also have some signals. You mentioned the price signals can be necessary, regulation can be necessary. It's of course not that pleasant as the easier and nicer way, but it's probably necessary. And then I have written social pressure on my paper here, because I really think that if we go together and do this, we will also have, people will feel kind of off track if they kind of don't do the environmentally good things, and I think that's needed as well. So yeah, we have a big burden here to do something that can be a pattern model for the world.
Yeah.
Comment on the responsibility, because when we ask our passengers or customers what we should do to improve the bus product in order to get more customers, they say we should be reliable, we should be fast, and we shouldn't stop too many times. When we ask them about the climate or the environment, they rank that actually very low. Now the agenda is changing, so it's rising on the agenda, but that also means that there's a special responsibility on the supply side, on the institutions that need to provide bicycles and all this. But we have to set the scene to cultivate the demand in the end.
I want to get a bit of a feel for how close you feel we are to the limit of what you can do with what you've got today. For example, the motto, Copenhagen wants to be Europe's first, we want to be Europe's first carbon neutral capital. But who is the we? And you as Københavns Kommune, how much do you control, how much can you control, and how much, on the other hand, can you facilitate other people to reduce their emissions? Because you can do it. For your own fleet, for your own staff, you can manage their mobility. Everything within your power, everyone here is almost doing that. But the stuff that you don't control, that gets interesting, I think.
Can I answer?
Of course.
Okay, just a quick answer. I'll just say that I almost rest my case because I agree so much with all of you. I think it's very important to say that I think that smart mobility is a means to make a livable city. I mean, we have a strong focus on smart mobility, ITS and so forth, but the end goal is, of course, to make a livable and the world's best city and so forth. So that's very important, I think, not to forget what we're actually striving to do.
Yeah.
But now you ask if we can do it ourselves. I don't think so. We need, as you said.
I'm asking if you feel that the weight is on you to do it all yourself, or, you know, as I'm saying, I think the crux is somehow the individual vehicle journeys that you have the least control over. And of course, with something like their traffic management, you do the most you can to manage that, but still, people are still doing the travel, they're still doing the emissions.
But I don't think we can do any of it ourselves. We have a lot of partners involved. I think we do it together with a lot of other municipalities and the regions and companies and so forth. And I mean, we embrace ideas like Ikea with great not only enthusiasm but love. We like that in Copenhagen, of course. But I think to integrate it more and to make more smart and for instance, some multimodal stations and so forth, more supercycle highways, more regional cooperation is important, and that's the only way we can do it. We also work with park and ride, and we can't do that ourselves in Copenhagen because people actually have to park their car outside the municipality of Copenhagen. But to convince or persuade a municipality outside Copenhagen to make a big parking lot so the commuters can park their car and go to Copenhagen, that's quite difficult, and we cannot spend our tax money in other municipalities and so forth. But so we have to work together, no doubt about that. And I think it is a way forward, of course. Sure. And then involve the citizens, of course. That's also a very important thing. I also see two tracks, because we have the track, and I actually promised you not to mention that, but now you did it yourself. You said regulations or restrictions.
Sure.
I think it's very important to say that we can create incentives for people to bike. And when you ask people why they bike in Copenhagen, they say it's because it's cheap, it's fast, and it's the easiest way around. Not because of the environment, not because of anything else, but it's cheap and it's fast. And I think you have to create incentives to make more people bike and walk and so forth. But if you want to get, I mean, we only have 8 years or 7 years to 2025. And I mean, we also need some kind of restrictions. We need to make people pay more to park their cars, I think, and so forth. If we are to, of course, that's a political decision. But I think it's quite important also to look at that side of
the conclusion of this workshop might be, well, you've got to force people. Somehow there's got to be something unpleasant, you said that. So I'm just saying, you're going to do that anyway. You don't need, and you're not going to ask these other people what they think. Oh, shall I bring in congestion charging? No. Well, nobody's going to, no turkeys vote for Christmas. So, you know, I was going to ask you, Nikolai, from the demand responsive transport is something that was up in the previous session was about mass, and it was all a kind of Donkey Republic and Movia, Encore and ride-hailing service. That was a demand responsive transfer. So could demand responsive transport for people and for goods be an element in the next step? I mean, you said that it doesn't have to be Ikea running their own fleet, because the advantage of that is, and this is where the sharing comes in, that if we have some marketplace that allows us to combine demand for vehicles, for transport by vehicles, and we have a marketplace that has information on the supply of vehicles, all of this in real time, that's the mass game. You kind of balance real time, it's sort of short-term stuff, it's not long-term planning. I could see that, and I think maybe as an operator, and you as well, I think all the operators are looking at how to be more flexible, get away from fixed timetables, get away from fixed routes. It can be complementary if you have strong demand to fill buses and trams and metros. That's necessary for a city of this size. You can't have just lots of small vehicles running around. The guy mentioned a city in Texas which had no public transport whatsoever, and then they introduced one line that went from the top to the bottom on a fixed timetable, and of course it didn't work very well, and it was so expensive they were going to stop it, so they took it out. They put in a demand responsive system. It's now the largest city in the US that has totally and only a demand responsive public transport system, no line services. So this is a tendency, for sure. It meets the customer's needs, it meets your needs, it gets closer to your just-in-time processes and things. What, Nikolai, can I ask you that?
Was that a question?
The question is, how far do you think?
What I'm thinking
yeah.
is that we have to combine mobility as a service with on-demand.
Right.
Because, and the reason why we have to do that is there's multiple reasons, but on-demand is cost-effective. And we have to think cost-effectiveness into this because money talks. And everybody around the table, there's a lot of buzzwords, there's a lot of good thoughts, but we have to make it stick. We have to make the bottom line stick. So it has to be cost-effective. So we need to combine on-demand because we only run vehicles when they are needed, so no empty seats in any transportation, and no empty rooms in our transportation vehicles. On-demand with mobility as a service, where we integrate all the various vehicle types to create an effective marketplace, which also has a quality that people want to use. Because the real problem here is that we have a lot of people here, business leaders, and when we have a lot of thoughts, oh, this is great, we can do this, we think this is brilliant. But when we're talking mobility, it's about the individual making a choice every day when they leave their house. And as a business leader, we cannot force people to make that choice. We can do that, but then we have to go 80 years back and live in a different society. So what we have to do is create a mobility product, combining cars, buses, bicycles, and so on and so forth, which is so attractive that people will actually use it. So that's the task. And then have a product which is so attractive that people will not use their car, because the car is the key here, okay? It's pretty straightforward. And the way we make it attractive enough is to increase the quality of public transport, the integration of vehicles and regulation. For example, increase the costs of driving a car into a city. So you do a portfolio of things until you reach your target. So no, you cannot do one thing, you have to do a portfolio of things and then create an attractive alternative to using your car. So was that an answer to?
Yeah, that's a good answer. The question, you used the word "we" there again, and I think Nobina is generally in the public transport business and not in the parcel delivery or flat pack furniture business. So
But I would like to be. I run buses by Ikea in Tostrup.
Yes.
So I could pick up parcels. If we did it in a creative, intelligent way, we could do that, and we can save your trucks going back and forth. So,
Right.
so yes, we can integrate, and we can actually combine our strengths and our resources.
I like to hear that. Helle, you've been listening patiently. There was this whole discussion on mass earlier, and then somebody asked from the audience about, what about carpooling? Carpooling hadn't been discussed. So you've got 6,000 employees, and you said one building alone has 2,500. So this is one of the bigger activity centers in the city. So yeah, how do you manage the mobility there? And for example, how do you promote ride sharing so that carpooling ride sharing so that it results in fewer cars needed to get your people to get to work?
Actually, it's rather easy because we placed our new headquarters close to the metro station. That's one thing. We made it extremely expensive to park your car, and only very few managers has a cart going down to the parking lane. So it's easy. We didn't make them. They don't have any choice. They'll have to take the metro. So that's the easy part. But afterwards, we told them that they were losing weight, going on bikes and walking to work, and they were doing something good for the environment. So we did it the other way around.
I like that. Easier to do when you're planning a new office. What about all the other employers? It seems to me that the traditional view on mass is that it's a product aimed at end users, but they also, of course, market the service to businesses. And I think employers or leisure centers or other hospitals, other great generators of demand for mobility is a place to look for opportunities for sharing. And just one example, when I used to work at Ertica, I was in a 24-story tower with 5 stories underground of car parking with about 100 spaces on each one, so about 500 cars for a couple of thousand people. I think you probably have rather fewer than that. Not once did the tenants of one floor talk to any of the other tenants in the building about sharing, about setting up a carpool. And you mentioned trust in the beginning. Trust is really important. If you're going to get people out of cars, private cars where they feel safe, into anything else that's collective, where they have less control over the way it's running, less control over who else is with them, then you've got to keep that trust. And I think it's easier to do that if you're in a large office block as one tenant with other ones, that you talk together as the tenants of a large block. Then maybe you generate enough demand that's worth his while to run an on-demand bus service, or even a semi-scheduled one for the commuters, for example. Yes.
I'll just admit that you're touching a very soft point here, talking about the hospitals. You mentioned the word hospital, so I kind of had to admit that we have a problem here. When I talked about our activities earlier, it is very much related to the staff and the goods and traveling during which we can control directly, where we can do activities, and we're really doing that. But we have, as I mentioned, 45,000 employees, and they are going to work. We also have patients, we also have visitors, and they are creating a lot of traffic, a lot of congestion, and if you tried to go to the hospital in Copenhagen, you most likely would have had difficulties in finding a parking place, if that was the way you went there. It's a big issue, and can we keep then the easy for the guests and patients, and not the staff, or how to do that, and how to. So that's a very big issue. We have made a parking strategy for that issue, which is so it's short-term parking very close to the entrance, long-term parking further away with electric possibilities both near and further away. But it would be very interesting. We have tried to make it easier for the Drive Now Green Mobility shared services to go into the hospitals, because it should be, if a lot of people working it, reduce the need for parking places, which is a big problem. So if we can find solutions together to solve that, it would be very interesting.
Sure. Sure, Niels.
I think we have to realize that as we look at different sectors being disruptive, I mentioned the mail system, the post. Now Ikea is on its path, but also cities are disrupting. We actually in our city are now in a situation that we have a big, huge industrial area made in the 60s for total different purposes, total way of production. Now we have to transform the whole area. You are doing it in your city in different places, actually taking old functions out of use and change in a total radical way. And when we're doing that, we have to consider all kinds of new technology solutions, and we have to incorporate that we as business, as city planners, also have to be experimental on the edge, and we actually have to dive into all what is possible. So I think this is a process where we also on the board of the municipality, on the management side of the municipality, have to actually be actively working with our city as living labs, as a place where you constantly transform it and you are considering yourself as being in the disruption, meaning new type of living, new type of houses, new type of shopping centers. Maybe we don't have shopping centers, so what do we do with the old shopping centers? Which kind of functions do we have there? Now it would be cafes, theaters, doctors, health houses, but not shops, because maybe you have a showroom for some items. Maybe Ikea will, in our small shopping center, have some showroom where you can ask for some help when you need to design your kitchen or whatever. The rest will come on a truck. You don't need the big warehouse, you need to be local in the service center. Maybe in the municipality information center, you can be there. So I think we have to realize that cities are disrupting as well as technology, as well as services.
Yeah.
But just to comment, I agree. I think that's very. Of course, we have to look into that. There's a lot of responsibilities on the city planners. I agree. Also, when it comes to planning for, the amount of parking spaces in a building or in a new development area and so forth. And in the 60s, they thought they were right as well. Today, we think we're right.
Yeah.
We're just doing it other things, and I think they're more right today than they were in the 60s. But I actually think they tried to do something right by. Well, that was another time at that time. But when it comes to Mars, just trying to get back to the mobility as a service.
Yeah.
I think it's really important. I think it's actually it is doable, but we have some special different interests in mobility as a service. I think one of our concerns at the city of Copenhagen is that if we make it very easy for people to use, for instance, car-sharing companies or buses, then they won't bike anymore or walk. So, if it's very easy on a rainy day to take a car, and if it's not very expensive, then you might do it. So it's also how do you actually create a mobility as a service platform or app where you can share, where you make people make the green choices. I think that's important for us because we have some targets and goals, trying to reduce the amounts of cars and so on, and I'm not sure, I don't know, is the question, will mobility as a service, will it reduce the amount of cars, the amount of trips done? I'm not quite sure, but that's...
Can I just...
Yes, that's very interesting.
I think in the end we need to appreciate that we are all captured. And we are all captured in decisions from the past. So we can bring more buses, more bluer stuff, we are all captured. So when I look at myself, I've got a wonderful train connection to my office. I've also got a lease car. I don't have a mobility budget. So from the lease car, so even on days that I'm pretty sure that I won't leave my office, I still use my car. I don't have a chip card for public transport because I've got the lease card. And other ones are in public transport, and the moment they say that now we need a car, they don't have access. You have to arrange it, have a phone call, go with your driver's license. What if I can say, look, I'm going to Ikea, and I might use my loyalty card of Ikea to get access to the public transport. Then what I get, pretty soon in the Netherlands I can use my bank card to get access to public transport. Then it's something I've got in my pocket. I think the first step is to get rid of this capturing of ourselves from decisions from the past and get away with these little hurdles. Use the things we already have in our pockets to get access. And the moment we get access, the moment we can say, look, I'm going to Ikea because Ikea told me I can go by park, I can do it, and that. They don't have to need to provide the data themselves. They can use somebody for the data, but they are my portal because I'm on their website. I'm not on the website of the mass provider. I'm looking at the chair at the very moment. So if you can get away from that all these little borders, then we can make people free to make new decisions.
Paul and the team, I'm just aware that I said we would be interactive with it.
Sorry.
Let's all turn around and look at the audience. They're feeling a bit neglected. Yeah.
Hi.
Can I have a mobile mic? Thanks.
Hi. I just want to ask. You told us that there was a session before about the mass array.
Yeah.
Excuse if I ask a question that only been answered, but I think it's a very important question. Now all you are here, that we are talking about this mass as a solution. And to make public transport, or at least to make people not choosing their car. But how are we going to do that? How are we going to organize the maze? I mean, the technologies are there, but I think there's, like you also hear here, there's a lot of political, like Casper saying there's a lot of political agendas, and there's a lot of cross-border agreements that there has to be made. I think, again, the technology are there, but how are we actually going to do it?
Yeah.
That was
That's a very good question. I was actually going to come on to that at 4:30, and it's 4:31. I'm just going to see, does anyone else have a question?
No, over here.
You? And, sorry.
I was just wondering, we have a lot of kindergartens that lie far away from where people live. So maybe you should think about where to put people's children, because then you don't have a car as a demand. If you don't need to drive them somewhere, then you can take them by bike, you can walk them. They learn that they can do with bike or walking. That's one thing. Then there's a possibility of using outside of Copenhagen, where you have 6,000 people in the region. I mean, maybe there was some other firms that would like to use some of your spacing, so they don't have to go inside Copenhagen. Then you reduce the car hours inside Copenhagen. I think it's a very good idea with the Ikea inside of Copenhagen. But I think it should be a showroom, because otherwise we need to take all stuff into Copenhagen, and then we have to use a lot of trucks going there, and then it makes noises, and people are getting angry about the noise and the pollution. So I think it should go directly to the customer instead. And then park and ride. It should be the state, not the municipalities, who should pay those park and ride systems. If we pay the space to put it, it would be okay, but not to make the parking lot.
Okay, and we'll come back with the answers for the discussion. There was another question?
Okay, thank you very much. I think we're really making progress here. We were starting with only 30% reduction. Up here we have 40, but actually you have to reduce by 50% before 2030 if we are to fulfill the 1.5 degree requirement.
I didn't want to scare them off.
No, but
before starting.
Here's the thing. I mean, we have really an excellent group of people responsible for transport in this Copenhagen area. Could you agree on a carbon budget for transport in Copenhagen for the next decade. That would be really awesome if you could agree on a budget and then decide who will contribute how much to fulfill that budget. Not just jumping to individual projects, but maybe going for some strategic program. Like one saying, okay, for that we need 200,000 electric cars in the region by 2030. Who can deliver how much of that? And we also need to get the occupancy rate of the cars up and to at least 2 on average per car. And you can each contribute because you have employees, you have customers, you have clients, and so on. And then you can say, okay, what remains to be fulfilled? Okay, we need 2 other partners. One is the central government. So they need to deliver something as well. And maybe you also need the car drivers. I mean, where are they? They're also organized. Maybe they could deliver something as well. So could you agree on a budget and could you get this going?
Thank you.
So quickly jumping off of that point in terms of a regional way to look at how you're prioritizing your investments, thinking, are you going to have to force folks to, as all of you are, implementing policy, how are you going to get everybody to buy in and think from there, what goals can we set, how can we agree collectively to achieve them? So in terms of capital expansion, there's a lot of projects on the horizon right now. You're obviously looking to figure out a way to get people who don't have access to public transportation to then have access to public transportation. A lot of those folks are driving cars. So across the region, what ways can you collaboratively agree to prioritize your investments in capital expansion that would favor a more environmental approach as opposed to ones that are even politically motivated or ones that are more driven by cost-benefit analysis rather than explicitly just trying to reduce emissions? Are there ways that you can do that?
Right, I think we've got a few questions. Any answers from the, would you want to follow that up? No. Yeah.
I believe that there are some measures you have to take into consideration to do how to do these things. First of all, you have to work collective based on a big vision where you agree on certain priorities. We have to do it the political way. Sorry to say, but that's how things are done, how things move. If you have a political settled goal that we all can agree upon, then we interact according to that. That's clear for me. The other thing is we have to measure what we're doing. So if we set up some political goals, we have to measure how we are progressing, and we have to go back every time we are measuring. And with all this smart technology we have today, we can measure everything. So we can measure emissions, we can measure how things are, how the mobility is operating, how it's run, and who is there, and which kind of cars and everything which is needed. And we can go back when we measure things to revise our plans because we are living in a very dynamic world today where things are changing so fast and rapidly that maybe a decision you took 2 years ago have to be changed and have to be iterated because new technology came into place, and what you believed yesterday was the right solution, tomorrow is the wrong solution. We are discussing actually with Nikolai in the new city area, how can we trust this anonymous bus and how should it operate? And what conditions can we put on developers making new developments in housing and what do I know, offices? What requirements can we do to them if we can offer some of your services on demand and so on? So it's all, where are we? Can we believe it's up and running, so and so? So what I mean is, we have to look at this as something that is changing, and we have to have a very strong political background, and we have to work to collective, and we have to measure. Then from there, I think we can get results.
Yeah. First,
I don't know, right. There are a few things I don't disagree at all. I don't think everything is politically driven. I think companies like us, I think the public can demand something and then it becomes a political issue. I think in a lot of my experiences that in many sustainability related topics, companies are far ahead from decision making. makers, and it's only when companies or public demand shows that there is a necessity or a will, or it's possible to do it without additional cost, then we get the political. I'm not pointing at any municipalities, but we see reluctance to be regulatory strong and driving this agenda in many ways, I think. I just wanted to comment a little bit on also the fact that we talk about this as a climate agenda. I think it's a lot more than a climate agenda. I think it's a lot more than cutting or reducing impact. It's about creating better cities. It's about creating livability and movability and lack of congestion and all the other things that are positive measures. And that's why it's important that we combine everything. And as you say, I can't remember the word, but a palette of many different issues. And then it comes back to it not being a negative business case. Of course it is. I mean, there might be some initial investments required, but it's better business because we decouple from fossil fuel prices going up and down, and people are less dependent, less sick because of less congestion, they move around more. All these other positive aspects need to be put into consideration. I think that's when we succeed. It can never be sort of, business or the environmental choice. It's a combination of those two. When we talk about sustainability, we talk about the three aspects, and it's not just to be, or back to the report and talk about we do something good. It needs to be business driven. It needs to be something that make us thrive more as people and as businesses. Then we've come up with good solutions. We see men with us, I think 400,000 members of Drive now. So we see already a move towards mobility as a sort of, you use it when you want it, and we see positive development. We're a lot better at transporting things than people are. We have 3 times as high pollution from people taking their car to Ikea than us taking the stuff to Ikea. So yes, I agree, it needs to be we agree, somehow we shouldn't put big storage facilities in the city centres, but we have very few trucks because we are very good at designing products so they could be stacked really well. We have a very high filling rate in our trucks. We have a very, very small amount of trucks coming to and from our stores because of that. Because it's cost reduction and cost driven as well. We reduce the impact, but we also are very efficient. But completely agree, we shouldn't have big storages in the city centres. There should be showrooms, and we should bring things to people. That was many things. I can't remember what the question was. But that was just my initial reaction to the things that I thought was related to what we are doing. Yes, a combination of everything. That's all.
So I'm just going to sort of pause for 1 second here because we've got now just under 20 minutes left in the session. This really is turning out to be a live session. I think we are actually having a very useful discussion in that I think we're discussing things that you particular people and organizations don't normally do in your day-to-day business. And I think that's the first thing that I want to build on that. I think your question about how to organize mass is what I wanted to come on to next. And it'll allow me to put a couple of things on the table, and then we'll have a short time to discuss. But then I would like to come to a decision by the end, ideally, that there's enough to work on. We're not doing it now. We are talking around many subjects. One subject, I think, is how do we give a decision value to a kilogram of carbon dioxide or greenhouse gas? This comes back to your question about budgets. I totally agree that there needs to be a budget. I think that's not this group. That is at a political level. It says we accept a need to cut 50% of CO2 in whatever the period. It's a target. That's the policy, and then you apply that policy and everything over which you have control. What is nice about this table is it includes private organizations who are profit-driven. And if we can achieve the public policy goals through business-driven decisions, if we end up with fewer kilograms of carbon from Ikea customers going, when they have taken a business-driven decision to open some town centre shops where people don't go by car, then that's a business decision that coincides very well with the political or social level objectives. So that's an important thing. The same with a bank. If you look at your employees, if you look at your customers. So I think most businesses and employers don't for the moment see themselves as responsible for the carbon emissions coming from their customers' use of the customers going to the hospital, or customers going to the cinema, going to whatever. So that's a perspective that we can build on here, I think, that will lead us towards a view of mobility services. Again, to go back to the previous session, there were 5 entrepreneurs, startups, there was Donkey Republic. You can't stop that happening. It happens again because, and it succeeds. In Manchester, the bike share scheme has been withdrawn because the citizens of Manchester apparently prefer vandalising the bikes, throwing them in the canal, whatever. Obviously that doesn't work. In the Danish culture, people are trusting and they care, and it works here. So you didn't have to say yes or no. Donkey Republic could set up business. And why not? It gives people a choice. So all of these things where people have a choice, this is where these are many of the elements that come together well in a platform that is MaaS. MaaS is a kind of platform that's a brokerage and exchange where you can collect demand from people, but also from moving the goods. And transport suppliers, we have 2 of them here, plus the OnDemand and ride sharing, whatever. They view the demand through the platform. And if it works properly, they see demand that they would not normally look at because it's coming from a new source, which is some kind of an online way for individuals, companies, employers, whoever, to say, I need some transport. And then things balance themselves, they finance themselves. So I think ideally you're looking at a kind of platform of platforms. So we had MaaS Global on the table there before. Their model is a commercial one. Their idea is you sell a subscription to pure mobility, everything you need instead of a car. It's on demand, we supply it, we guarantee it, whatever. There's room for that in this ecosystem. But then they are also, in a way, just one service provider. So I think we could come together and form, let's say, a kind of super organization that could even become a company, but that would then procure and oversee and supervise, but not control, a platform where new providers can come in and new ideas for collecting demand. Now, a friend of mine was going to come here who was on the stand, one second, who was going to come from one of the stands over there. In the Netherlands, he knows about a project that was done looking at hospitals. Travel to hospitals by patients who have an appointment there as a day patient, or they're going back to see the doctor that operated on them, whatever. If the hospital department that schedules appointments with the doctors knew that 2 of those patients actually live within close enough that they could be condensed into one trip, then you could optimize, you could get rid of one car trip to the hospital. Now, what would you need to do actually to make that work? So this was, I think, a theoretical study, although they may have done a pilot as well. But if you start thinking about, really, let me think how I could really do this. The idea of looking at people's diaries or looking at appointment schedules and saying, there's an implication even with that for an opportunity to reduce the travel we're trying to reduce. Sorry, there was a question first and then Hella.
I just think time is a very big factor in this one as well. It's not only the cars. If you can take your car and be at work in 15, 20 minutes, mouth of Peter, but we actually in Denmark have this solution by taking people to the hospitals together. It's called Flextrafik. So we actually already have this one.
Okay, brilliant.
We have this this kind of a lot of people work from home now.
Yeah.
They have the opportunity to take their laptops, go at home and work. So if it's a bit complicated to take transport, they won't go. And that's a problem because we want to make culture. When they show up, we want to make a company culture. And it's very easy just to stay away and do your work from home. So maybe this transportation thing for employees are nice to have, right? Because we want them to go. So we would like it to be easy. If you can't park, if it's a bit complicated, they won't come. So the businesses will have a big interest in making it very easy to go back and forth to work.
Yeah.
You mentioned all the small filial branches we have all over the country, but people are not coming to the banks anymore. So one of the disruptions is that the customers are not coming. So they are not transporting themselves. So we can have as much buses and so on as we like. We don't have anyone in them, right? So that's a different problem.
Yeah.
Actually, I think that the question about Mars, if we almost have all the pieces of the puzzle, we just need to put them together. And I think maybe instead of putting them all together at once, we should do it one by one, like Lego bricks or something like that. In order not to do it too complex and to take the first steps first and see what works and then build on that. Obviously public transport should be a major part of that because there's a huge supply side and there's a lot of trips going back and forth with public transport, and we have a lot of data, and we have also already the travel planners and all this that could actually also be put to display for other companies to develop.
Just to comment on that, I agree, and we already have my travel plan, which has been showcased here. So I think the difficult thing about creating that has not been the technology. It is there, as you he left. But it's not the technology. The technical solutions are there, but it's working together. And I mean, so therefore I think it's a good initiative. I think we should do more of that, work together, and we could work on top of this my travel plan to integrate more services, because I think it's also an interesting thought. I don't remember who of you said it, but this have some kind of Mars for goods as well. If you could combine it, I don't know if it exists, but you would have a Mars for personal transportation and then a Mars for goods delivery. Or
we have somebody who's been waiting a long time.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry to interrupt. I think this important element is the focus on the user. I mean, some of you have touched upon it, but you mentioned we increase the quality of transportation, but look at transportation as something which happens not just from A to B, but before. There's nothing worse than going out and missing a bus, standing in the rain, and then thinking, wow, I'm saving the world. I mean, it's something which makes people not choose it again. On the bikes as well, you need to have showers at the end, turning up sweaty to a meeting is just great. So focusing on the entire user experience in that, of course you have to reduce the travel times and so forth, but it has to be a good experience all the way through.
Did you also have a question?
I think I would add, I'm Mike White from the Danish Cyclists Federation, and of course we want more bicycles in the cities. One of the things we see today in Denmark is that cyclism is decreasing, and that's due to cheap cars, cheap petrol, and also the structure of society as it is. I mean, the way we structure our everyday life, the way we plan our cities, it's still a very motorized planning. In Sweden there's a very interesting house called the Bicycle House, which is meant for people who live their lives with their bicycles, and it's very much built to facilitate people with bicycles only, and there's no car parking at all. In Denmark, we plan houses and private homes for people with cars, and then we put in some bicycle parking as well. So it's the whole mindset of our society that's a problem and a challenge. And also people are very complacent. I mean, the richer we get, the more we want to go in a car. We don't want to be outside in the rain and wind and so forth, sweating. So we really need a change of our brains, our minds. We got the technology, we got the solutions, but we need people to adopt and live with it and accept it, and also accept a lower standard of living, perhaps.
Okay. Thank you. Just one thing, just to say we have 5 minutes left, so 1 minute for you.
I like the idea of going to the hospitals in a more flexible way, and I think it really depends on where the area is. If you go by bike, it has to be pleasant. I like the idea also of putting it together as bricks, so that you can have the travel card, the travel plan, and there in the travel plan you can make different options. For example, it's okay to me to go together with somebody else. For example, the flex traffic for the hospital works for some type of patients, but if you need the general one, you need to have it in the plan as well. And I think you can do that by building it up, and if we kind of join together around that and support it, we can make a big change in that way for hospitals, but also for if somebody goes to the bank or to Ikea or whatever they're going.
I know I've been talking a lot.
No, you've not been talking too much. Nobody has. I think it's been really, for me, very exciting to listen to this. I feel that there's dialogue here. It's not just people always now talking from their point of view. We've got something in the middle here on the table. We don't know the shape of it yet. I feel it would be, what I would like is that you agree it's worth, we've started a discussion, it is worth continuing, and that it is different from what we do now in this forum or in the, what's the name called? Concita, or any of these other groups. There are lots of groups of consultations on what I think what is needed is something that is different, that has almost a legal power to build a framework, but not a centralized one, but one that is a kind of network, more like an Ethernet network, where you can plug in your demand or your offer, because we've got to balance supply and demand. In the long term, we need to look at maybe cycle-friendly house design. But I like the point, you need a budget, you need to set, this is the amount of CO2 we can afford to emit in total, my fleet, your fleets, your employees and your customers, your logistics. Put it all together and say, this is the total. We have to cut it by this much. And then everybody work together to say, well, here's a piece of it. You know, by doing what you're doing, moving into the city, one of the consequences is a reduction in CO2. One of rationalizing transport to and from hospitals is a piece of it. But if you're not all together in a common enterprise, it won't happen, and you won't be able to say, well, actually, I can help with his share. You know. So my question is, would people be interested to discuss whether you actually would form a kind of almost legal partnership with an objective, a carbon-saving objective that people would commit to, not as in the sense of a promise, but just say, we believe we have to work together in a way that we can actually control things. If we think we need a mass platform or a more general journey planner, you know, we will say we need that, and then you will be managing it and controlling it. If you have someone to come in like Mass Global that says, we will just come into your city and set up a service, but it won't cover rural areas and it won't cover patients because they can't travel, and what happens to all the people that are too old or can't use a bike or a shared bike? So, you know, there's still a large, and those are the people that are still using a car or feel that they need to use a car. And they're the ones that you've got to come up with a service that is as good as the car. Otherwise, why should they change? You're forcing them to accept a lower quality of life. And I don't think you need to. And I think by doing it this way, with this platform that becomes a sort of company, the commercial players in that partnership will earn, would say, if you think and innovate, you will earn more by being part of that than if you stayed outside and tried to do it yourself. And but you should also, the public entities should also be a shareholding partner of that. That's my question. Do you agree, 1 minute to 5, that this is worth discussing? No promises. Yeah.
Well, I don't think you're, going to get us to sign a legal document that we're going to. But what we have done and what we strongly believe in is being part of Gate 21 actually, because the whole point about Gate 21 is to put together different people from different organizations and coming up with ideas, doing living labs, test cases that we can then use and integrate into the city development plans. So that's the whole point of being part of it. To be here, to meet these people, able to pick up the phone and say, hey, you got a challenge, I can help you with that. And that's exactly what Gate 21 is great at, and that's why we're part of it. And that would also tap into what the audience said about the whole experience, because I'm only part of the experience and you other guys are other parts of the experience. So only by being together at the same table can we cover the whole experience of each and every citizen. So.
I never meant to suggest that Gate 21 couldn't be that organization. The only thing my question would be, don't you also need some of the smaller entities and businesses who are not members? So I think it's a great place to be preparing it, but maybe you actually will need in the end something that is slightly more business oriented.
Can I get it?
Yeah.
I love the idea. Yes, from my perspective, we would love to move forward, but a bit more from the idea of this logo. I mean, in the end, if you need a company, there will be a company. If you need contracts, there will be the contracts. But that's because liability and all the other difficult stuff comes in place. But just by connecting dots, making the baby. When a baby comes alive, it never starts jumping. It starts to learn to make baby steps. So I really would prefer to sit down together and let's try to identify baby steps. Having this ideal goal, wonderful idea. Guys, this is the budget. This is where we would like to be. And how what are the baby steps towards that? That discussion be clear.
Yeah.
Can I have I think if we look into problems with carbon emission and climate change, I think we have many answers for energy production, renewables.
Yeah.
I think we have many answers for energy efficiency and flexible energy systems. So I think the big headache today is emissions from mobility and transport. So I think we can talk about budgets, carbon budgets. I really believe, and I think this is where the next battle will be. And further on, like with energy, there's a lot of money in it, to be truth. It's also bottom line driven. There's jobs.
Yeah.
So the green thinking is also black bottom line for companies.
Yeah.
So I think there are the necessary ingredients, political wise, climate change wise, to reduce emissions and to have a more efficient society, not to waste time in cars, but to have a more effective way of transporting yourself or not transporting yourself.
I have to stop us.
So
we have to.
Can I take the final?
No, but the next session is there. We have to get all this out of the way.
We have to say thank you for all the participants.
Thank you.
And I think that we are now going into a new strategy period of Gate 21 and mobility. So this is a very good starting point where we have to improve the sustainable mobility in the region. So we will meet again in the board. And thank you very much for your attendance.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.